Hey there, I'm Stephan Kesting, and this is the Grapple Arts Radio Podcast. And this is Budo Jake, an icon of the Southern California Jiu-Jitsu scene and the owner of Budo Videos. So he's going to tell us exactly how you can start your competing gi and DVD company, right? Or there are no more secrets in Jiu-Jitsu, but there might be secrets in business.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on, Stephen. Yeah. It's a great community that we're in, and I'm glad you're part of it.
Oh, well, the mutual admiration portion of this interview is now over, so now we get to the dirt. So you're a Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Gracie Barra.
Yep.
How long ago did you start training?
Started there in 2005, so about 11 years ago.
Okay. Did you have a martial arts background before that?
Yeah, I started martial arts when I was about 13, starting like out in karate, like a lot of kids tend to. Then did a little Kempo and Kendo and trained at the Gokor for a few times and kind of bounced around. And then when Marcio Feitosa and Carlos Gracie Jr. moved here, in 2005, it was a very different landscape than it is now. You had to drive probably half an hour to get to a good school, whereas now you throw a rock in any direction and you'll hit a world champion. So back in 2005, that was the school to go to, and we had everybody training there. Babalu and Homolo Bahal.
It's down in Irvine.
In Irvine, yeah. And it still is a great school. Philippe de la Monica runs it now, and always have tons of black belts in there, especially around tournament time. We're around Pans right now. We got a lot of top talent, so it's a really good school to train at.
Okay. And so once you hit the jiu-jitsu thing, you stayed with it, or do you still train in other martial arts?
I was doing Aikido for a long time and teaching as well. And I did both for about 5 years. And then I just came to a realization that, you know what? In Jiu-Jitsu, the learning there's no limit to how much you can learn, as opposed to traditional martial arts where we're trying to emulate somebody who died 100 years ago. Right. So I slowly lost interest in the traditional martial arts and focused everything on Jiu-Jitsu. I was going every day and was training as much as I could because, there's a limit to how much we can do. We can do Jiu-Jitsu our whole lives, but we do lose a little flexibility and strength as we get older. Right.
So, but if I did the knife hand attack here,
yeah, I'd be ready to go.
We'd end up in a wrist lock.
That's right.
I just got to just warm up a bit so I can do the big flying somersault.
That's right.
Well, I think there's value in things like Aikido, as long as it's mostly a problem that I have with the training method, which is 100% cooperative. If there was a way that they could spar it without killing each other.
Yeah, and some people have tried that. I don't think it works.
Oh, there was live Aikido sparring?
Yeah, there's a group called Tomiki, and they use a knife.
Oh, okay.
And so they try to stab each other and try to throw each other, but it just ends up looking like sloppy judo. So in my opinion, Aikido is not so much a martial art, but a way of teaching philosophy through movement.
Okay.
Because why practice an attack like this? It makes no sense at all. But when you're learning principles of movement and relaxation in movement, it makes a little more sense.
Okay. And some of the sort of submissions within Aikido, the wrist locks, they can definitely be applied in a real context.
Yeah. I made 2 DVDs all over it because there's not a lot of guys that teach wrist locks. The Brazilians weren't exposed to them too much. And in judo, they don't use them. But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the wrist. Absolutely. How do you,
the thing that I've noticed with wrist locks is it's an area that's really prone to injury. It's almost like a heel hook in terms of, you apply it hurts, and then it pops. And there's not a lot of leeway there. Like, say, if you got me in an arm bar, it hurts, then it hurts some more, then it really, really hurts, and then there's a pop.
Right.
Typically.
Right.
It just seems that with the wrist locks, it comes on much quicker, and they can be insidious little injuries that stick around forever.
That's right. I think the key is if a wrist lock is being applied, you need to know how dangerous it is. And if I grab your wrist like this, there's no danger. No matter how hard I try to crank it, you're not going to get hurt. Now, if I control your elbow and do the same thing, it's going to hurt.
Right.
So when you feel that your elbow is stuck and you feel someone's pressure here, then you need to get ready to tap. So it's kind of, it's not their fault, but it's ignorance on the person receiving the wrist lock. And of course, an upper belt shouldn't just slam it on. You should always apply slowly with control.
Yeah. A friend of mine actually, have you ever heard of this injury? He hurt his wrist, I think it might have been snowboarding, which is essentially a high-speed wrist lock into the snow. And one of the little bones in the wrist, I think they're called scaphoid bones. I don't have the budget yet to have a researcher doing research as we're talking. That'll be my goal for next year. So I can look really intelligent. And one of the little bones in the wrist got broken and then died.
Oh.
So then he had a dead bone in his wrist, and they had to have some kind of crazy surgery, like go into the hip and take out a piece of bone and implant it into the wrist bone. Have you heard of this?
I haven't. That sounds awful.
Yeah. It was quite the ordeal. He's fine now.
Right.
But it's...
yeah, small joint locks, heel hooks, and wrist locks. I would mess around. If you feel, like I said, if you feel your elbows trapped and your wrist is getting cranked, tap. Same with the heel hook.
But the trouble is, there's this perception that they're super cheesy.
Yeah.
So you don't, like, okay, I got caught in an arm lock. Okay, I got caught in a bow and arrow choke. I have, like, this is a, quote, legit technique.
Right.
But you're not going to catch one of those effing Aikido things. No way. Ah! Pop, pop, pop.
Right.
So.
But to apply, I would argue that to apply a good wrist lock, you have to have positional dominance.
Oh, for sure.
So it's not like you're just doing something cheap. You've maybe got them in cross-side position and then you apply it. So the person receiving it has messed up already.
Sure, sure.
I would say, get rid of the ego, just tap and come to class the next day.
Yeah. Although there is, I think Sankyo, the inward twisting, which I have used successfully from escaping rear mount and ending up on the bottom of mount and Sankyoing the guy on top.
Right.
Repeatedly.
Right.
And so there's the double indignity of A, it's a Aikido wrist lock, and B, you're on mount. You're mounted on the guy and now you're tapping out.
Right.
So that's particularly hard on the ego. And it's probably not made easier by after I get it.
Right.
You run around giggling like a schoolgirl.
That's right.
And point it out often and many times.
As a similar note, submitting somebody when they have passed your guard and you're on the bottom of side control. People don't want to tap.
Sure.
When they're on top. They think that's a dominant position and there shouldn't be.
You're talking like a baseball bat.
A baseball bat choke or an elbow lock from the bottom using your legs.
Right.
Those are positions that people just, their mind is, I shouldn't be tapping here.
Does not compute.
Right. And I've injured people there, not because I was applying something too quickly, but just they don't think you should tap from there.
Well, a few years ago, you did in conjunction, as a collaboration, you did a DVD on the baseball bat choke.
Yeah.
Which has put a lot of good competitors to sleep who've
Right.
been really good at passing the guard.
Right. In fact, I'll share a story. When I was a blue belt, training at GB headquarters, there's a black belt visiting, Upiano. He's a famous black belt from Texas. And we were doing a guard pass drill. And, we start and I thought, okay, I'm going to pass this guy's guard so fast. If I pass a black belt's guard, it'll be awesome. So we go and I pass his guard. I get there. I get nice and tight. I think, oh my gosh, I passed a black belt's guard. This is awesome. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up. I didn't know about the baseball bat grip. He had it. And I was on top, passed out. So it took him a while to realize that I was out. And, man, that was a rude awakening to the power of the baseball choke.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he was at least cognizant of it, didn't keep it on too long. After.
Well, he did keep it on a little long because I didn't tap.
Okay.
And my head was face down on his chest. So I was out for longer than I should have been.
I remember a friend of mine asked me, is there a good counter for the triangle choke once it's fully on? I was like, man, and this guy had the body built for a triangle. And, well, there's some things you can try. You can try wrapping the thigh and bearing down and creating a bit of room. And so, show me. So he put me in the triangle and I held it and it's tight. Like he's got the body built. He's got long, skinny legs and I'm holding it. And then I'm like, what? I feel the room shaking. And it feels like there's an earthquake. I'm like, is there an earthquake? And then I hear like a sound.
Right.
And I'm like, who's snoring? And it's like, oh, I'm shaking and I'm snoring. But the blocking position had worked just enough that I didn't go completely unconscious. I would go just a little bit unconscious and then come to. So I could then think, what's that shaking? Go a little bit unconscious, come to. What's that snoring?
Right.
So it was working enough to not like pass out and drool on the mat. So I don't know if that's worse than a full block. That's probably the worst of both worlds. It's like, a boxer hitting somebody and then holding them up so they can hit them again.
Right.
So.
One of my first Kempo teachers, David German, he told a story. He was in the military. I think he was in Vietnam. And they said when they wanted to mess with someone, they'd choke him out. Like not a Vietnamese guy, but American military guy. They choke him out, put him in a closet, and close the door. So when you come to, you think you're dead. Right? And I just remember saying at a seminar, like the look on their face when they come crashing through that closet door is priceless.
I've never heard that before. You also put them in a tunnel with a white light at the end.
Yeah, that's even better. So how many times have you been choked out?
How many times have I been choked out? Not that many times. I'm getting better at tapping. I remember getting the first time I got knocked out was in judo, like waking. I was an 11-year-old kid in an adult class, and a big 11-year-old, and waking up, like looking at the ground, my feet were in the air, and there were some very, very concerned looking judo instructors looking down at me. In terms of other, maybe 2 times, 3 times, not a whole lot of times. I've, more closer to concussions from either judo or from boxing or stick fighting. Right. A good solid hit to the head, but it actually the other day I was fumbling with a generator that was down behind under this heavy metal lid, and I was down there trying to turn it on or turn it off, and the lid came down and just sandwiched my head between the rim of the generator and the lid. And it's a good thing I'd taken all those shots to the head earlier, because it's like, I don't know if there's such a thing as brain conditioning or skull conditioning, but maybe they've been accretions of bone on the brow, and that Neanderthal DNA. That Europeans are 1 to 4% Neanderthal. I think that might be more on the 4% side.
I mean, I think everybody should try not to be knocked out or choked out, but I'm kind of glad I've had the experience.
How many times have you been choked out?
A handful, maybe 5, and then.
Oh, you're way more stubborn than I am.
I knocked out maybe 3. Okay. But I think it teaches you your limits. If you always tap right away, you don't know how far you can push the escape. Right. Now I know. Okay, I got a little bit of time to give. And like you say, taking blows to the head. If you've never taken a blow to your head before, then you might be really surprised in a street fight.
Yes, I mean I think it's actually a really important lesson to get punched in the face in boxing sparring.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you can keep going. This idea, we're trained by movies that one punch and the person goes out.
Right.
And it's just not true. If that was true, then boxing matches would be 30 seconds long, not 12 rounds long.
Yeah, they do wear big gloves, but still, it's one punch knockouts are rare. Yeah.
These are people who spend their entire lives training around the one punch knockout.
And how many times in the early UFCs did you see guys break their hands?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was why they put the gloves on, not to protect the guy getting hit.
Oh, for sure.
The strike.
It's a huge misconception in both boxing and MMA that the gloves are to protect the person. They're not at all. Yeah. It's to protect the fighter's hands. I mean, just try punching a cinder block wall with and without MMA gloves.
Right.
And that's not even including all the taping and the gauzing and that's a dark art right there. You can punch somebody way harder with gloves than you can without. And kinetic energy is going into the head somehow. Have you done much? It sounds like you have done some boxing.
A little bit of boxing. In Kempo and a little bit in karate before that, and in backyard boxing with my brother growing up.
You and Kimbo?
Yeah, that's right.
I hope you taught him a lesson.
Right. I mean, it's not something that I care to do anymore. I don't think taking blows to the head over and over again is not something I want to do. But hey, to the guys that do, more power to you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important thing to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. How many times have you been grappling with somebody and accidentally knee him or something, and they'll say, wait, stop. It's like, hey, you don't need to make that big of a deal about it. You just keep on going.
Right. It's just, ultimately there is striking in jiu-jitsu, even if it's inadvertent knee to the face.
That's right.
This nose didn't get so beautiful and straight all on its own.
Right.
It didn't come out looking like this. Let me tell you, there's been some serious, what the hell was it? The guy was trying to do like a capoeira type move to get out of a guard sweep, and it was a kick right across the bridge of the nose. Oh well, it's not I just need to break it the other way, and then it'll be perfectly lined up, right? That's how it works.
Right.
So then, where did the Budo Jake nickname come from?
So there were 2, my real name is Jacob, and there's 2 Jacobs in the class. And so to differentiate, Marciota started using the Budo name. And Budo means martial arts in Japanese. And he knew that I was always going to different academies and interviewing different people, not only from jiu-jitsu, but from sambo and judo and whatever. So, that's the name that stuck.
Okay. Well, as nicknames go, it's not a bad one.
No.
It's like little kids fighting. I get to be Great Chief Awesome Eagle Feather.
Right.
Nobody wants to be Chief Slimy Toad or something.
That's right. Most of the Brazilians have really bad nicknames if you translate them. A lot of people don't know what they mean. There's guys with cartoon character names, and usually they're making fun of their facial characteristics. But Americans tend to get the little better nicknames.
Yeah. Pan Ams are coming up. I don't know if they'll probably be over by the time that this hosts. So now you can be prescient. You can make your predictions. And what are you looking forward to seeing?
It's always such a huge event. It's the largest tournament in the world.
It's like 5 days long now.
Right. So it's always interesting to see some of the lower belts come up. It's hard to keep up to date with who these guys are, but anybody who medals at any of the ranks have the qualities to be the next world champion. But, it'll be nice to see Leandro Lo out there and Bernardo Faria and, the usual guys.
Mm-hmm. Any sort of technical innovations that you're looking for this year? I mean, you've done a lot of commentating on this, I mean, this is your life. So,
in the past, there was some big jumps that we saw every year. The 50-50, that was huge. In recent years, it's fun to see the 50-50 not become such a stalling position. People get in and out of it really quickly. But there's not like one new move that I'm expecting to see more of this year. I would like to be surprised by that. But I guess more than anything, just more crafty lapel work, things that Keenan Cornelius and Keishinho, they do some really amazing things with the lapel.
Wormguard 3.0.
Yeah, reverse de la wormguard, all this crazy stuff. So I think that's the area where there's probably room for a little more innovation.
Yeah. I suppose it just adds an extra set of sort of limbs to the what would monkey jiu-jitsu look like if monkeys could start using their tails to wrap people up.
That's right.
And you've broadcast these events in the past, so you're not doing that now. You're just acting, so you can actually maybe enjoy being there.
That's right. Because doing the broadcast, it was a lot of work. And a lot of mats, a lot of days, lots of cameramen. Yeah, it's a tremendous undertaking.
Having done some video work and a tiny bit of live video work with, say, one camera,
right,
I can only think of the nightmare that would have been.
Right.
And out here, I got jiu-jitsu, my friend, so I have to relax and pretend like I'm calm. Have you been to Brazil? Have you been to Japan? You just got back from a trip.
Let's see. Japan, I was there a few months ago, in last June, actually. So it's been a few months. But yeah, Japan and Brazil, I think, are two great places for the jiu-jitsu addict to go to. Brazil, because that's where it was developed. And a lot of people ask, do I need to go to Brazil? And I don't think you have to. There's so many amazing teachers in America. Assuming we're speaking to an American audience, there's some great ones in Canada too, of course, all over the world. But to see the cultural background of where jiu-jitsu blossomed and why it blossomed there, and what would happen if Maeda didn't go to Brazil. And I think the reason jiu-jitsu was able to...
You would end up with the German jiu-jitsu, and it would be very, very systematic.
Yeah, maybe. But
GermanJiu-Jitsu.com, check it out. It was a spoof site I did. I thought it was hilarious. A few Germans thought it was hilarious, and the rest of the world was just baffled. But GermanJiu-Jitsu.com.
I'll check it out.
It was a one-page site. Sorry, go on. Right, so you're saying the cultural elements that forged Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, in Brazil, there's a lot of machismo. Street fights are commonplace. And so jiu-jitsu was able to develop under those conditions. Japan, on the other hand, nowadays is super safe. No one's going to get into a street fight. I saw one in 3 years when I was living there. And, you need that real world application to develop the self-defense guard and all that stuff. So I think Brazil is a great place to go to experience a little bit of that. And Japan is great because that's where it came from. Some people will say it originated in India, but there's not a whole lot of proof or history to show that. But certainly Japan had the traditional jiu-jitsu schools, so it's cool to see that culture as well. And nowadays Japanese jiu-jitsu is pretty much gone. It's all judo, and the jiu-jitsu schools are Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools. So it's funny that it was exported from Japan to Brazil, and now the Brazilians are teaching it back to the Japanese.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this before, sort of how the idea of a cultural crucible, and how I think I mentioned to you that I'd run into, completely unconnected from the jiu-jitsu scene, a Brazilian family, and they learned that I did Brazil. So I'm like, hey, did you know that Stephan does Brazilian jiu-jitsu? And they're like, is that Gracie stuff? I said, yeah. And then they went on a diatribe about what a bunch of a-holes from their experience, the Gracie family had been in Rio. And some story of how a friend of a friend of a friend had looked at the wrong girl and had been put in the hospital for, like, I'm only hearing a version of someone's version of the story, but how basically out of nowhere they got sworn by a bunch of Gracie guys and beaten to a pulp and ended up in the hospital and almost dead. So this was not like a friendly, we're now dealing with a gentler, kinder version of jiu-jitsu. This was not necessarily a gentle and kind area to develop this in. Right.
And, to be fair, the Gracie family is huge.
Yes.
And there's probably some a-holes in every family.
Sure.
But imagine if they hadn't been issuing this challenge and they were just a closed group and just teaching to their own family and not so aggressive about it, I don't think it would have developed. You know, it took these street fights to prove, you know, Helio and Carlos fought to show how effective jiu-jitsu was. And there might be some, there might have been jerks about it, but we have this beautiful art now because of that.
Oh, sure. I mean, good things come out of terrible, the colonization of North America wasn't pleasant at all for the people who were living here prior to us getting here, but it's pretty pleasant now, at least for a lot of people. Boy, I'm going to get some angry emails about that topic. Read Stolen Continents. I have read Stolen Continents. It's a good book. I know we've also talked in the past about how Japan goes from this incredibly militaristic, incredibly warrior society in the Middle Ages to then a period of comparative peace after, in the 1800s to a period of trying to take over the entire Pacific. And certainly nobody who was, dealing with the Japanese in 1944 thought that this was a particularly peaceful society or thought that they were particularly safe to now super peaceful. Yeah. So it's, I guess the original system was spawned out of an incredible, like jiu-jitsu, judo, even aikido, right? Yep. Peace, harmony, merging with your opponent. Not that many generations back, it was like, here's how to kill a man who's got a bucket of rice that you want to take from him or whatever.
Right. And, maybe a lot of people don't know now, but the martial arts in Japan changed drastically after the war. Everybody started focusing on peace. And so all the names of the traditional marts changed from ending in jutsu, which means techniques, to do, which means way. Yeah. So jiu-jitsu, which was about killing and breaking bones, became judo. Aikijutsu became aikido.
Ninjutsu hasn't yet. We need to found nindo.
There's nimpo, which is similar. But darn. Kyujutsu became kyudo. So everything changed. And, some people still want to go back and study the more effective militaristic versions.
Of course, now it's detached. There's nobody left, really. You can't probably learn iaido, drawing a sword from somebody who's really ambushed somebody and really cut somebody's head off with a sword by essentially doing the sword version of sucker punching, sucker slicing them.
And a lot of, there's some dark stuff, but a lot of their sword skills came from practicing on prisoners.
Right.
And, they would know where you need to cut through a body and stuff. It's some gruesome stuff,
The sword testing, and then you get a stamp on your sword saying, yes, this has been prisoner approved.
Right. But, because of all that dark stuff, just like jiu-jitsu in Brazil, we have these techniques that we have proof that they work.
The other thing I've often thought about in the past is people talk about these cultures, these super warlike cultures that are never, ever, ever going to change. They've been fighting for thousands of years. Well, 1,000 years ago, people in England didn't think very highly of the Vikings, right? From the fury of the Norsemen, protect us, O Lord, because they were coming down, they were raping and pillaging and burning and stealing and murdering. And now is there a safer, calmer place in the world than Scandinavia?
That's right.
So we need to revive the Norse arts. I'm sure there's a lot of. Have you experienced much of the historical European swordsmanship?
No, I know there's some stuff out there, but I haven't looked too much into it.
I wish I had more time because it's. Anytime you're whacking somebody with a large piece of metal or wood, pretending to be metal, it's fun. But man, they get into some really. They get down into the weeds pretty quickly about. Yes, well, in 1653, they changed the poignard of the sword to angle to the left.
Right.
It's many of the same arguments that we have about, traditional martial arts. They're recreating there. Because again, there's nobody left in Europe who's actually taken someone's head off with a battle axe.
Right.
So, okay. Right now you run Budo videos. So, disambiguate all the people who think that this is an easy job. Like, you're on the road a lot, and you're talking to a ton of people, and you're making a ton of videos. What's your day-to-day like? Is there even a day-to-day?
Yeah, it is certainly a lot of work, and it's a balance. It's tough to find a balance. And I'll be honest, in the past 10 years, I spent a lot of time at a desk. People... That doesn't make interesting videos. There's no videos of it. But all people see is me out traveling around, going to different academies.
Yeah, your Rolled Up series, which is a fantastic web series, and
Thank you.
People really dig that because you're living it there for that. You are living the dream of traveling and training with different big names.
Right. And it's a super fun show to produce, but there's a lot of work in the background that takes place and a lot of sitting at a desk. And I did that for a long time. And last year I decided, you know what? I've sat at a desk for too long. I'm not going to do it anymore. So I streamlined everything. I hardly have any paperwork anymore. I spend a lot of time outside of the office now. I'm doing a ton of yoga. I feel healthier than ever and training jiu-jitsu a lot too. So,
I'll say you're looking a bit more buff than you did, when did I see you last? Year and a half ago? 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
I've fallen in love with yoga and I think it makes a perfect balance with jiu-jitsu.
What kind of yoga?
A few different kinds. Hatha Vinyasa, acro yoga is my favorite. Hot yoga. All those.
Hot acro yoga. What could possibly go wrong? How many times a week are you doing it?
About 9 times a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A lot.
And you're still doing jiu-jitsu on top of that.
I am. So, and a lot of people think that jiu-jitsu is good for your body. Certainly they'll give you that pitch when you sign up, but you take a lot of abuse, especially if you're training with tough guys, getting ready for tournaments or whatever. It's not good on your body. So I think you need a little bit of yin with the yang. So for me, yoga is that.
Do you do any other type of supplemental conditioning? I guess if you're not up to 9 times a week, then
no, that's it. I don't do any strength training because with yoga, you're working on your flexibility and your strength. But you have to be careful not to build too much strength because then your flexibility will suffer. So for now, I'm focusing on a lot on flexibility. And
a lot of strength at the end of the range of motion.
Right. Just body weight strength, though, not with weights.
Right. That was something that was a sort of revelation for me, was that if you're weightlifting, typically the hardest part of, say, the bench press is sort of in the middle of the range of motion, right? Mm-hmm. It's not when your arms are all the way back or all the way forward. It's when your arms are sort of bent 90 degrees, and then you're really, really working.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the yoga strength positions, you're at the limits of your range of flexibility, and that maybe translates a little bit better to jiu-jitsu when you really need the strength. It's not halfway through the arm bar.
Right.
or it's closer to the ends of the range of motion.
Right. And I don't know about you, but when I grapple against really big, strong guys, oftentimes I have the easiest time with them because they have such poor flexibility. You get them in a kimura or an omoplata and they'll tap so fast. Whereas the leaner, more flexible people, man, they're so hard to submit sometimes.
Okay. So in the jiu-jitsu context, who are like some of the best people you've rolled with? Because you've had the pleasure and the privilege, frankly, of training with some really good people all around the world, both at Gracie Barra, where there's this parade of people coming through, and on your travels.
Right. I get that question a lot, and it's hard to say who's the best. I mean, if you talk about who smashed me the most, Eric Paulson, because he outweighs me by over 100 pounds. He has awesome technique as well. But, I respect the guys that don't use their weight too much because I'm a lighter guy. I'm 150 pounds. So guys like Jeff Glover and Kaio Teha, are two that come to mind immediately. Both have fantastic movement and they both are not strong guys. Kaio in particular is one of the weakest guys I've ever rolled with, but so technical. His timing is precise. And, that's what jiu-jitsu is, using technique over strength. So those two come to mind. Cobrinha, of course, Rafa Mendes, all those guys are just a joy to roll with.
Yeah, I guess you're in a dangerous position here because as soon as you say 3 guys, you should be mentioning 3 other names as well.
Right. But I enjoy. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but when somebody comes in off the street into an academy, they don't know your level. So oftentimes I found, whether it's on camera or not, the first roll, they will smash 100% and just establish that they're the boss.
Yeah.
And then maybe the next time we roll, they'll step it down a little bit. And the next time it'll roll, it'll be a little bit more competitive. They'll allow it to be more competitive because I'm not a world champion. So if you're going to visit, this turns into a piece of advice. If you're going to visit another academy and you just go for one class, you're probably going to get some aggression from the instructor or the black belts, unless he's a super high level guy that he knows he has nothing to worry about. But if you stay there for a couple of days, your rolls will likely get more fun as they see your level. And, sad to say, a lot of instructors do have egos, and their ego comes down a little bit, and they're able to let you play your game a little bit more.
Well, let's talk a little bit about visiting other academies, because you've done a lot of it. I used to do way more of it back in the day when I had more time. And it was almost always a fantastic experience, and you learned a lot. But you really have to know what the rules of that academy are in order to, if you've been raised in an academy where you can, I don't know, where the IBJJF rules are kind of disregarded. You've got more maybe an old school teacher who doesn't follow that, and he's busy teaching you very effective leg reaping stuff, and you start doing it there. You're going to make some enemies really quickly.
Right.
Or what are some other examples of footlocks in general? I remember going to this academy once, and this guy, the black belt, was legitimately way better than I was. But in the scramble, I caught an ankle lock. Mm-hmm. And I remember holding that ankle lock. I was a blue belt, and the entire class had stopped watching to see the roll. And he was just sitting there, because this is back in the day when a lot of guys had no clue of how to get out of leg locks. And it's like, should I finish this? Mm-hmm. And the answer was probably not. Right. He's only going to lose face, at which point he needs to, seriously smash me. Mm-hmm. And he could have, because he was legitimately better than I was. He just screwed up and underestimated one aspect of my game. So it would have been a short-term gain. And I ended up training there for a few months. And it was a really nice place to train, because I was on the road at that point, working away from home. And I would have burnt that bridge for the sake of, tapping a black belt. So, that would have been a cultural faux pas. But what are some cultural faux pas that you've seen when you've been training? It's like guys coming in and doing what?
One thing is some academies, you stop when you get to the side of the mat, whether it's because you'll fall on the wood or even against the wall. So it's understood that we don't keep going when we hit the wall. Other academies, it'll be MMA style. You don't stop. You keep going. If you push them against the wall, you can use the wall to your advantage. So that's a little thing. At GB, for example, we always stop when we get to the wall.
Didn't Jacare just use the wall to pass someone's guard in MMA?
I didn't see that, but hey, why not?
I think he had the guy's legs pinned, and he basically, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Jacare, walked his legs up onto the wall, and basically not teleported, hovered over the legs. Yeah. It was really cool.
Why not?
Sorry.
Other things would be, the IBJJF rules. Heel hooking generally at Gracie Barra, nobody does it. Only if, sometimes I'll do it with Fudao, the head instructor, and it's understood that only we're going to do this because a lot of people don't have the control.
Right.
Other things like knee bars and toe holds, generally those are for brown belts and up. But, maybe if you talk with a lower belt and you say, hey, let's do this, and but you don't crank anything, you hold it. So, and a lot of times that's not just because the person applying it can't do it correctly, but it's the person defending that might try to turn the wrong way. Yes. And by turning the wrong way, you're going to double the force against you. So it's for both people's safety. But you're right. There are differences between each school, and it would behoove you to be aware of those. Yeah.
I mean, then there's even simple things like, can you wear your own gi?
Yeah.
You train at school X and you go to school Y. It may not be a problem. Some schools don't care, and some schools are super particular. No, if you come here, not only do you have to wear our gi, you have to wear a special belt. If you wear a blue belt, you can't wear that here because you got that somewhere else.
Right. Wearing white gi. Some academies don't want anything but white gis on the mat. So
right.
If you're going to have one gi to go to another academy, then it'd be a good idea to have that be a white gi.
Mm-hmm. Do you have to wear a rash guard under your gi or not? Mm-hmm. Bowing on and off the mat. Some schools do that. Some schools couldn't care less.
Right.
How do you call, what's the protocol for asking questions? I mean, these things are important because you can alienate people pretty quickly.
Right. At some academies, you have to call the instructor a professor. And I've heard stories of people going to another academy and calling that professor, and that guy getting upset for being called professor. So.
That would be me. But my outrage at being called professor is mostly mock. I mean, I recognize that people are trying to be polite, right? That they're trying to follow the forms. It's just in my particular case that drives me nuts.
Right.
So now, of course, I have friends doing it and elevating it to, Supreme Grandmaster Poobah, which of course drives me nuts. But
which bothers you more, being called professor or us?
Us can be used ironically. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing it more and more. I mean, I think it used to indicate something like Kyokushin, kind of like a reflexive obedience. Mm-hmm. Or you see some jiu-jitsu schools, okay, everyone seen the technique? Okay, 1, 2, clap and go. Okay. So I would be mortified if us was being used in a context of like, hi sensei. Mm-hmm. Like, But most of the time, at least so far, I've seen it used only ironically in the jiu-jitsu context.
Okay. There's some academies that use it all the time.
Well, that would honestly probably be a deal breaker for me. It's funny how, I've got a part German background, and there's a lot of Germans who are super anti-authoritarian because I guess not that long ago, within living memory, they saw what reflexive authoritarian or reflexive obedience of authoritarian structures led to.
Right.
So, no thinking, only doing what I say.
Right.
So yeah, I've got no problem with ironic use of us. And Bernardo Faria, every second email or text that I share with him is, ends with us.
Right.
He's Bernardo.
Yeah.
He's a human being. He's humble, and he's using it ironically.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to think of other sort of academy faux pas that, there's nothing like, fortunately we're not involved in, I think jiu-jitsu probably has the least amount of crazies coming through the door. I think if we ran or were involved in MMA schools, we'd have more guys like, I just got out of prison and now I gotta, get paid to fight. Right. I got lawyers' fees to pay off. It tends to attract more insane people.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the TMAs attract insane people that think they have these superpowers, because there's no real sparring to prove.
Right.
Whereas in jiu-jitsu, if you think you're a badass, like, you gotta show it.
Yeah. Well, that I used to agree with you, but now my new chi choke, which I can apply for this, looks a lot like Darth Vader. There, video proof. Video proof.
Wow. You gotta teach me that one, Steve.
Well, that's my double platinum program. So maybe we'll produce a DVD and charge $25,000 for it. So in Southern California here, it's kind of the crucible of jiu-jitsu in North America. Mm-hmm. You're starting to see other centers of development. I think New York is a big, with sort of the dueling, competing academies with Henzo's, with Danaher's group there, and Marcelo's Academy and Shaolin. That's another center for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It's kind of driving, those schools grading against each other is driving evolution. Do you see any other sort of centers up and coming where there's a ton of...
There's pockets definitely all over the country, but as far as those kind of rivalries like we have in Southern California and New York, these are the two biggest cities, and I think you've nailed it that those are the two that have the biggest concentrations of schools.
So you're kind of counting San Diego and San Francisco in the SoCal. San Francisco's not Southern California, but whatever.
Right.
They're still in the general scene.
Yeah.
It's really only a 4-hour drive for the tournament.
Yeah, and I can't think of any schools in San Francisco. Of course, Half is up there with Kurt, but there's not any other real big powerhouse schools. Oh, you got Coyoteha and in Modesto, you have Samir and Casino. So yeah, some great schools all over. That's for sure.
Do you see, in the context of your involvement with Budo, you're talking to a lot of people, and I imagine that a lot of people consuming the information that you're putting out. Certainly, it's true for me with grapple arts. Yeah, there's people who are in the centers, but then there's also people who are at, some tiny little village in Wyoming, 200 miles from the nearest official jiu-jitsu academy.
Right.
So what advice would you have for those people who are really out of touch? It's an hour or more drive for them to train with anybody established.
Well, thanks to all the material that your company and mine and others have put out, they can have access to the world's best instructors. So even if there was an academy nearby, instruction might be better on video. That's not to say you can just watch a video and become a master. You need to practice with people, but I think, you don't have to be training under a Gracie to become a really good high-level guy. And sometimes there's people from the Midwest or these remote places that end up getting to be awesome. Look at Lovato.
Yeah, Lovato is the guy who comes to mind.
Yeah.
Is it Oklahoma?
Yep.
Yeah, he's out in Oklahoma, so there's not a hotbed for jiu-jitsu. Right. I think the nearest, I think for a while he was coming to California and going to Texas to train, I think. I forget.
And then in EBI a couple times ago, there was a guy from the South. I don't remember his name, but he was a long-haired guy, and he looked amazing. And I never heard of him before. So you don't have to come from a great school. You don't have to come from a big city. All the information is out there.
You just need to train.
That's right.
So actually need to put in the work and hopefully have some talent to go with it, but the work is more important.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of, as we're wrapping up here, for people who are starting jiu-jitsu from the beginning, they've been listening to me for a while. They've been watching your videos. They're finally ready to do it. They're going to finally start training at a real place. So what words of wisdom would you give them? What would be your advice to them starting out on this jiu-jitsu journey?
In the beginning, you're going to get tapped a lot. And I would say that even though your ego tells you not to tap, you should, because the difference between you and the next guy who's going to get better faster is who spends more time at the academy. And if you don't tap and you get injured, you're going to be out for a while. Thankfully, I had very few injuries throughout my career, but that was because I trained smartly. And so I would say that tap when you need to. And as far as what to focus on, I found the biggest improvement for me was focusing on defense, because when you're a beginner, you're not going to be able to tap other more advanced guys. But if you can focus on defense, you can stay in the game longer and you might have a window of opportunity. So defense was something that I focused on early on. I thought that was good. I see too many beginners nowadays trying to focus on their game. And,
I agree with you. I think it's important to focus on your game down the road.
Down the road. Just like in college, we have general education where you have to study a lot of things that you might not want to. And then later you get to choose what you want to study. And there might be something that you would never have chosen, that like geology. I was not interested in that at all, but I had a great teacher and I found it to be fascinating. If I would have said, nope, I'm not going to study geology, I would never have been exposed to that. And so there's guys nowadays that say like, butterfly guard, that's outdated. That's not my game. I'm going to focus on De La Riva. And I don't think you should do that. I think you should study everything and try to get to be a decent level at everything. And then maybe a late purple belt, start thinking about developing your game.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, blue belt is a level of getting the basic techniques and getting a bunch of stuff that works for you. And by bunch of stuff, I mean not some crazy funk roll escape from side and out. It means the bridge, the shrimp, and putting them back in guard. You know, maybe coming to your knees, maybe some kind of, sit-up escape. Having a couple major options from every position that semi-reliably work for you against people that there's not a giant skill and size discrepancy. Because if you're only trying to develop stuff that works against black belts, well, good luck with that. I mean, that's a worthy goal. And certainly you should focus on techniques that will work at a high level. But, fleshing out your game and kind of taking your flashlight and peering in all the dark corners and going, wait a second, I have absolutely zero attacks from knee on belly. Or, I've got no way at all to escape rear mount. None. Like, you shouldn't be working on your De La Riva game and to the exclusion of all else until you've, taken a good look at yourself and made sure you've got something in each of those areas. Yeah. So by the high level blue, mid level purple, you can start, forget high level blue. I think I agree with you. Somewhere in purple belt, that's when you start saying, okay, well, I've got 3, 4, 5 years of experience now. And through experience, I've learned that this tends to work better for my body type, my game. Right. I feel happier when I do this kind of guard or guard pass or whatever.
Yeah, I see too many people that think that because of their body type, they exclude certain things. And Marcelo Garcia told me, look, I'm a short guy with a big head. If it works for me, it'll work for anybody. And then you compare him to Roger Gracie. He's a tall, lanky guy, and they all do different things, but I don't think there's anything that you should just outright exclude.
And then, Marcelo goes, and I forget which Worlds it was, but he finishes a fight with a triangle choke.
Yeah.
Right? So
short, fat legs.
Exactly. Yeah. After not focusing on the triangle choke for 10 years and developing his very distinctive game, all of a sudden he goes back into the past and I don't know what was going through his mind at that time, but pulls out a tool from the past.
Right.
And I guess probably half the triangle choke effectiveness was shock that I'm being triangle choked by some guy who's not known at all for his triangle chokes.
Right.
But, okay. So, to sum up, tap out a lot. Try and spend as much time on the mats as you can. That means don't get injured.
Right.
And try and get a broad understanding of the game initially.
Right. And to stay on the mats, I think you might need to do something besides just jiu-jitsu, because if you're getting beat up every time you come to class, it can be difficult on your body. So for me, I do yoga. Maybe you should want to go to the gym or jog or whatever you need to do to keep your body ready to train.
Right. Okay. Stay ready to train at all times.
Yeah.
Always be, ABT, always be training.
That's right.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end it on. Thanks so much, Jake.
Thanks for coming down, Stephen.
Good luck with everything.
Thanks. Thank you guys for watching.
Podcast listeners, if you're listening, there's a good chance that you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I hope that you are. It's the best martial art out there. But nevertheless, if you do Jiu-Jitsu, if you do grappling, if you do MMA, I've got a book out there. It's called A Roadmap to BJJ, and it covers the fundamentals of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It covers the techniques and the positions. It's got checklists. It's a super useful resource, and it's completely free. If you go to grapplearts.com/book, you can download it. It's also on Amazon Kindle where you can buy it if you want to go that way, but I'm going to suggest the free route, which is grapplearts.com/book. Check it out. I get feedback almost every day from people who found this super useful in finally getting through and understanding the ground game, and it finally making sense for them, and it finally not being so intimidating anymore. Check it out. I think you'll find it really useful too.